Hi, it's a pleasure to have you here. Before we get started, make sure to subscribe to the channel and like this video. The doctor's smile was the first warmth I'd seen in days, and when he said, "Good news, you can go home today," I felt the world shift under my feet, like something too good to trust. I blinked, unsure if I'd heard him right, because my chart said discharge was scheduled for tomorrow. The monitors beeped on like nothing had changed, but inside me something cracked open. Hope? Maybe, or just the desperate hunger for normal life. I asked, "Are you sure?" And he nodded gently, his voice kind but firm, and suddenly the white walls didn't feel like a cage anymore. I wasn't ready, but I didn't care. All I wanted was out. I sat on the edge of the hospital bed, my legs trembling beneath me, but the thought of going home wrapped around me like a warm blanket. The 4 had just been removed, the tape still clinging to my skin, and all I could think about was falling asleep in my own bed. Sheets that smelled like lavender and love. I imagined Mark's arms around me, the safety in his chest, the way his hand always found mine under the covers. The sterile white of the hospital vanished in my mind, replaced by the soft golden light of home. For the first time all week, I felt like I could breathe again. I reached for my phone, thumb hovering over Mark's name, ready to hear his voice, to share the relief, the joy, the surprise of good news. But then I stopped, a playful thought rising. What if I just showed up? Let him see me walk through that door smiling, strong again. The idea made my heart flutter. We'd been through so much lately, and he deserved a moment of happiness too. I locked the phone and slipped it back into my bag, holding on to the moment like a secret gift. Some surprises were better in person. The nurse helped me into the cab with gentle hands and a clipboard full of discharge papers, but I barely heard her instructions. My pulse was louder than her voice. I leaned back against the seat, the plastic interior smelling faintly of pine and fuel, and told the driver my address with a smile I couldn't hide. The city passed in blurs, too fast and too slow all at once, but my thoughts were fixed on one thing, Mark. I imagined his face when he saw me, the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, the way he always said my name like it meant something. My fingers gripped the hospital bag tighter as if it held the whole future inside. When the cab turned onto Maple Drive, a wave of warmth washed over me, chasing away the last chills of sickness and fear. I recognized the neighbor's Halloween wreath, still hanging even though it was November, and the same red mailbox that had stood crooked for years. Every little detail felt like a piece of my life clicking back into place. My eyes burned with relief. I was almost there, almost safe, almost home. The cab slowed in front of our driveway, and I couldn't stop smiling. Mark's car was parked exactly where it always was, a little crooked but familiar, comforting in its imperfection. But as I stepped out of the cab, something felt off. The house was still, too still. No music playing from the living room speakers, no clatter from the kitchen, not even the faint hum of the TV he always left on. I stood on the porch a moment, holding my breath, waiting for some sign of life. But there was only silence, thick and unexpected. I slid my key into the lock quietly, unsure why I was being so careful, as if the house itself were sleeping. The doorknob felt colder than I remembered. The air inside still and strange the moment I pushed it open. Maybe he was taking a nap. It had been a stressful week for both of us. I stepped inside slowly, my hospital bag bumping against my leg, the sound too loud in the silence. I closed the door behind me, soft as a secret. I took one step forward and froze. There it was, faint but undeniable. Laughter. A woman's laugh, high and soft and close enough to feel real. It came from upstairs, muffled but sharp, like it wasn't meant to be heard. My heartbeat faltered, then rushed ahead without me, pounding so loudly I thought they might hear it. I stood perfectly still, every instinct suddenly screaming. Maybe it was nothing. A neighbor stopping by, someone helping out, someone innocent. My brain scrambled to make sense of the sound, to fit it into a version of reality that didn't hurt. Mark had friends, coworkers, people from church, it could be any of them. But even as I tried to rationalize, my feet started moving on their own slow, careful steps toward the stairs. Something deep in me already knew, and it terrified me. I gripped the banister with one hand, the other bracing against the wall, each step feeling heavier than the last. My legs, still weak from the hospital, trembled under me, but I climbed anyway, drawn by something I didn't want to see. The laughter had stopped, replaced by quiet murmurs, lower now, more intimate. Every creak of the stairs sounded like a betrayal, like the house warning them I was coming. I held my breath, praying for it to be nothing and knowing it was everything. It was ajar, just a crack, enough to see light spilling through and shadows shifting inside. My hand hovered near the frame, fingers twitching, chest burning with something too wild to name. I could still turn back, still pretend I hadn't heard anything, hadn't come this far. But something pulled me forward, a force stronger than fear or pain. My eyes moved before the rest of me did, and then I saw Mark, my husband, naked, with another woman, in our bed, the same bed where he once held me through chemo, the same sheets where we made plans, cried, prayed. Her hair was tangled against his chest, her legs wrapped around him like they belonged there. Time stopped, then slammed into me with brutal force. I couldn't breathe, couldn't move. Everything I thought was solid just disintegrated in one sickening flash. He froze mid-movement, his body stiffening like a child caught doing something shameful, while she gasped and clutched the sheets to cover herself. But what broke me wasn't the betrayal. It was his eyes, locked on mine, wide and horrified, as if I was the one who didn't belong there. For a second, no one said anything. The room filled with silence so sharp it could cut skin. My heart screamed, but my mouth didn't. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I didn't ask why. I just turned slowly, mechanically, like my body had given up on emotion and chosen survival instead. I walked away from the door, from them, as the silence clung to my back like a ghost. Behind me, I heard him call my name, his voice shaking, scared, almost desperate, but it was too late. The sound meant nothing now. Every footstep I took felt like it echoed down a tunnel of disbelief. I didn't turn around, I couldn't. If I looked back, I'd fall apart. I stumbled down the stairs, one hand on the wall, my breath shallow, my vision blurry with shock. The front door flung open with a force I didn't remember using. The cold air slapped my face, but I welcomed it. It was real, alive, unlike the nightmare upstairs. I was barefoot, still wearing the hospital bracelet, the one with my name and marks as emergency contact. Now it felt like a cruel joke. As I reached the curb, the same cab that had brought me home was just pulling away. I waved frantically, and the driver's eyes widened as he stopped. I slid into the back seat, heart pounding, hands shaking so badly I could barely close the door. He looked at me through the mirror, confusion in his eyes, probably seeing the hospital gown peeking from my coat. "Back to the hospital?" he asked gently. I shook my head, unable to speak. "No," I whispered, my throat tight. "Anywhere but here." The words barely came out, but they were the truest I'd ever spoken. I didn't know where I was going, only that I couldn't stay. The driver nodded silently, pulling away from the curb as the house, that house, vanished behind me. I didn't look back. We ended up at a small roadside motel, neon light buzzing above the door like a heartbeat. I paid in cash, hands trembling, and the clerk didn't ask questions, just slid me the key and looked away. Inside the room, the curtains were drawn, the sheets stiff, the air cold. I sat on the edge of the bed, stared at the wall, and then everything I had held inside came crashing out. I cried so hard I couldn't tell if I was breathing. Later, in the bathroom, I caught my reflection and didn't recognize the woman staring back. Her hair was tangled, her lips colorless, her eyes hollow. Not angry, not broken, just gone. I leaned closer to the mirror, searching for something familiar, something real. There was nothing. It looked like someone who had died standing and hadn't realized it yet. I didn't sleep. I didn't eat. I just lay on the stiff motel bed, eyes wide open, watching the ceiling blur and twist. My mind played the same scene over and over like a cruel movie stuck on a loop. Her laugh, his face, the silence. I flinched every time I blinked, hoping I'd wake up and it would be over. But morning came and it was all still true. The sun came through the thin motel curtains like an accusation. Too bright, too early, too real. My phone buzzed on the nightstand, lighting up over and over with Mark's name. I can explain, please come home, it was a mistake. Each message hit harder than the last, like he was trying to patch up a wound with broken glass. I stared at the screen until the battery died, refusing to let his words pull me back. He had already taken enough from me, my trust, my home, my sense of safety. I didn't reply. I didn't type a single word, not even a curse or a question, just silence. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't strength. It was all I had left. Because sometimes silence isn't emptiness. It's the loudest scream someone can give when the heart is too shattered to speak. When Emma called, her voice rushed through the phone like a lifeline I didn't know I needed. You left the hospital early? What happened? She asked, alarm blooming in every syllable. I closed my eyes, unable to lie, but too tired for the full truth. I saw something I can't unsee, I said softly. And that was enough. She didn't press, didn't question, just said, I'm coming. She arrived 3 hours later, face pale from worry, eyes already wet. Emma had always been my protector, even when I didn't want protection, and seeing her made the dam inside me break again. She didn't ask for details. She just hugged me and whispered, You don't have to go through this alone. I collapsed into her arms like a child, letting her carry the weight I couldn't. That day, her car became my sanctuary. Her apartment was small but full of warmth, soft throws, candles that smelled like cinnamon, quiet music humming in the background. She made tea without asking, brought me clean clothes, tucked me into her guest bed like I was breakable glass. For the first time since everything shattered, I felt a flicker of safety. No explanations, no expectations, just room to breathe. But safety couldn't replace closure. A few days later, wrapped in Emma's robe and sipping lukewarm tea, I knew I had to go back. Not for him. Not to argue or beg or hear his lies. I needed to face the house, the bed, the betrayal, to take what was mine and leave with my dignity intact. The driveway looked exactly the same, but the air around it was heavier, like the house itself knew what had happened. I stepped out of Emma's car with my chin high, keys in hand, heart steady. As I walked toward the front door, I caught the scent of old roses and something else. Guilt, maybe. I didn't knock. I didn't hesitate. I was no longer coming home. I was retrieving what was left of me. He opened the door before I touched the handle, like he'd been waiting. His face was pale, drawn, a shadow of the man I used to know. I didn't think you'd come, he said, voice small. I didn't answer. I stepped inside, past him, into a house that once held love but now smelled of betrayal and bleach. I'm sorry, he blurted, following close behind. It just happened. I didn't plan it. His voice cracked like he thought that made it better, as if spontaneity excused the filth. I turned to face him briefly, eyes cold, arms crossed over my chest. There was no apology in the world that could fix what I saw, and I think he knew it. I'm not here to fight, I said calmly, every word sharp with restraint. I came for my clothes. His shoulders dropped like the wind had been knocked out of him, and I could see the reality sink in. There would be no screaming, no begging, no second chances. Just silence and packing and the weight of consequences. For once, I was the one in control. He followed me from room to room like a ghost, his presence thick in the air, silent but suffocating. Every time I opened a drawer or reached for a hanger, I felt his eyes on me, like he wanted to say something but didn't dare. My hand shook slightly, not from sadness anymore, but from adrenaline. This was the final goodbye, and we both knew it. I folded my clothes with slow precision, not rushing, not crying. He had already taken enough chaos. He wouldn't take my calm. As I zipped the second suitcase, I finally spoke. "Who is she?" I asked, my voice flat, not looking at him, not needing drama, just facts. He hesitated like a coward, then swallowed hard. I could hear the gears turning in his head, trying to minimize, to shape the truth into something less cruel. But I already knew the answer wouldn't matter. "A coworker," he said finally, his voice so low I almost missed it. It meant nothing. That sentence, so worn out and pathetic, dropped into the room like poison. I closed the suitcase slowly, pressing the zipper like a wound that needed sealing. I didn't flinch. I didn't speak, because there was no version of nothing that happened naked in our bed. "You brought her here," I said, finally turning to him, my eyes burning, not with tears but fury I refused to let explode. "Into our home. Into our bed." My voice cracked on that last word, "our," the sacred place he'd defiled. He didn't answer. He couldn't. The silence between us was louder than any scream I could have thrown. He opened his mouth, desperate to justify the unjustifiable. "You were gone for days," he said, like my illness, my absence, had created a vacuum he had to fill with betrayal. As if loneliness excused cruelty. As if weakness forgave destruction. I stared at him like he was a stranger. "You thought I'd never come back?" I asked, each word sharp, deliberate, holding back the scream that begged to break loose. "That I'd just fade away in some hospital room and make space for her?" He flinched finally, but I didn't let him speak. My voice didn't rise. I didn't throw things. The fire stayed inside, burning clean and controlled. "You didn't expect me to walk in, did you?" I said, stepping closer, not out of emotion but clarity. He looked down, ashamed, cornered, pathetic. Every ounce of his arrogance had vanished. All that remained was a man who destroyed something because he thought no one would catch him. But I did. I zipped the last bag and stood tall, no hesitation left in my bones. "You'll hear from my lawyer," I said, my voice like ice. I didn't offer a hug, a final glance, or a wish for closure. Some endings don't need words, just a door closing. And mine was already halfway shut. He lunged forward as I moved toward the door, his hand reaching out like he could still rewrite what had already been carved in stone. "Don't do this," he begged, his voice ragged. "Please. We can fix it." But even his desperation sounded rehearsed, like a script he'd used before. I didn't stop. I didn't flinch. At the door I turned just enough to say it. "You broke something that can't be fixed." The look on his face, part guilt, part disbelief, told me he was only now realizing the finality. I walked out with my head high, each step heavy but certain. Behind me, the house stayed silent. And I knew this was the last time I'd ever see it from the inside. I got into my sister's car and didn't look back as the house shrank in the rearview mirror, its windows like cold eyes watching me go. My hands clenched on my knees, but my breathing slowed, steady, as if every mile was breaking a chain. The streetlights blurred past like ghosts I was leaving behind. Emma didn't speak. She just drove, her hand reaching once to squeeze mine. For the first time in days, I felt a flicker of freedom beneath the weight of my grief. 2 days later, I sat in a law office that smelled faintly of old paper and lemon polish, the walls lined with books about endings and consequences. My lawyer, a sharp-eyed woman named Claire, listened without pity, only precision. She asked for dates, for proof, for facts, not feelings. I told her everything in a voice that didn't sound like mine. By the time we finished, the first steps of my new life were already in motion. Claire advised me to collect everything. Texts, dates, names, even small receipts. "Infidelity isn't just pain," she said calmly. "It's leverage." I went through my phone late that night, screenshotting each message, saving every fragment like pieces of a shattered mirror. It was grueling, but it gave me something to hold on to, not revenge, but order. The chaos of betrayal was becoming a case file. She explained the financial stakes without sugarcoating them. "This changes everything legally," she said, eyes on mine. We'll make sure he doesn't walk away with what's yours." Her certainty steadied me in a way no hug ever could. For the first time, I wasn't just a victim, I was a plaintiff, and that made me stronger. While going through our accounts, Claire found transfers, dinner charges, hotel stays, all from our joint savings. The money I'd been tucking away for medical bills for emergencies was gone. My stomach twisted as she scrolled through the records, each line another quiet betrayal. It wasn't just love he'd stolen. It was security. He had gutted me twice. Seeing the numbers hit harder than the sight of them together. Love could be a lie, but money was supposed to be solid and anchor. Instead, it had been funding his secrets. My hands trembled over the printed statements, but my voice stayed level. This wasn't just heartbreak anymore. This was war, and I had every right to fight. That day I stopped crying. The tears dried up like a well gone empty, leaving only clarity. I started making lists, plans, calls. I met with Claire again, signed documents, set deadlines. For the first time since the hospital, my reflection in the mirror looked like someone alive. Within a week, I'd rented a small apartment near Emma's. The walls were bare, the furniture secondhand, but it was mine, a clean slate. I unpacked slowly, placing each item like it was a statement. This stays, this goes, this is me now. No ghosts. No memories I didn't choose. Just quiet. I eased back into work part-time, took long walks after dusk, joined a support group where faces were tired but eyes still burned with hope. I learned to breathe again, to cook for one, to sleep without nightmares. Healing wasn't glamorous. It was small, steady, and painfully real. But it was working. One morning, over coffee in my tiny kitchen, an email arrived from an unfamiliar address. I didn't know he was still married. It was from her, the woman in my bed, her words sharp but strangely sad. She said she'd ended things with him, that he'd lied to her too. I stared at the screen for a long time, feeling nothing but the quiet satisfaction of a truth I hadn't asked for. She left him. The woman who took what wasn't hers walked away the moment she realized the truth. In the end, he lost both of us. The lie and the life he built on top of it collapsed in his hands. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt distant, like I was watching it happen to someone else. He burned everything, and now he stood alone in the ashes. Weeks later, he showed up at my door, eyes red, face hollow, holding nothing but regret. He didn't knock at first, just stood there waiting, hoping I'd still open the door out of habit. When I finally stepped outside, he whispered, "Please, I made a mistake." His voice cracked with something that used to matter. But it was too late for his pain to matter to me. I stood in the doorway, wrapped in a sweater that didn't smell like him, surrounded by a space he'd never touched. "You made a choice," I said, calm, final, unmoved. His shoulders sagged like he'd hoped for a fight and got a mirror instead. I didn't yell, didn't cry. I just let the silence widen between us. He wasn't part of my life anymore, just part of the past. As I closed the door, I realized something I hadn't felt in months. I wasn't angry anymore. The grief, the fury, the betrayal, it had all hollowed itself out. What was left was something quieter, steadier. I didn't need revenge or closure. I had peace, and that was louder than any apology he could offer. The divorce papers arrived on a Tuesday morning, sealed and official. I read every line carefully, not because I expected surprises, but because this moment deserved full presence. I signed with steady hands, no hesitation, no second-guessing. It wasn't an end full of drama or tears, just a clean, necessary break. My name, once tied to his, now stood alone again, strong, whole, mine. I bought a small used car with the money I saved after the split. Nothing fancy but reliable, and it smelled like freedom. I packed a weekend bag, left a note for Emma, and started driving with no destination, just the open road ahead. Every mile felt like a page turning, a weight falling off. I didn't need to know where I was going, only that I wasn't going back. It was time to meet myself again. At a farmer's market in a sleepy lakeside town, I stopped for fresh bread and ended up talking to the man behind the honey stand. His name was David, a widower with soft hands and kind eyes. He spoke gently, with pauses that made room for silence. We talked for almost an hour. Not about love, but about loss, resilience, gardens, dogs, and music. And when I left, I realized I was smiling. We met again the next day. Not planned, just life doing its quiet magic. He asked if I wanted to sit, share some tea, stay a while. We talked about second chances, how grief doesn't go away but makes space for new things. I didn't feel nervous or broken, just real like myself again. And somewhere between his laughter and the sun filtering through the trees, I felt something bloom. One afternoon we sat by the lake, feet in the water, saying nothing for a long time. The wind moved gently through the trees, the world quiet and still. I wasn't waiting for the other shoe to drop. I wasn't wondering if I was enough. For the first time in years, I wasn't surviving, I was living. And it felt like peace. As the sun dipped below the water, I caught my reflection in the ripples and didn't look away. I saw the woman I'd fought to become, scarred, softer, stronger. I had survived something I thought would destroy me. Not just survived it, transformed through it. I wasn't the same person who walked into that bedroom months ago. And thank God for that. Sometimes the most powerful revenge is simply never looking back. I didn't need him to suffer or understand what he'd broken. My life, reclaimed in quiet choices and long silences, had already become everything he couldn't give me. Pain had reshaped me, but it didn't define me. I had walked through fire and come out gold. I once wrote a letter to Mark in my journal, pouring out everything I never said to his face. Not for him, but for me. I wrote about the way betrayal cracks your bones quietly, about how healing doesn't come from closure, but from walking away without needing it. I never mailed it. I never even reread it. I just closed the notebook and moved on. One night at David's place, I spilled water all over myself and burst out laughing before he could even react. It was loud, unfiltered, the kind of laugh that shakes loose grief still hiding in the corners. He laughed too. Not at me, but with me, like it was the most beautiful sound he'd ever heard. In that moment, I realized laughter hadn't left me. It had just been waiting. David and I took a weekend trip to the mountains. Just a small cabin, no signal, no plans. We hiked, cooked together, read side by the fire. There were no declarations, no rushing, just presence. And in the quiet of those woods, I remembered how good it felt to be seen without being owned. At a grocery store months later, I passed a song I hadn't heard since the hospital, the one that used to play in the car rides with Mark. I froze right between the cereal and the tea, as tears filled my eyes without warning. But I didn't fall apart. I wiped them, took a breath, and kept walking. Healing didn't mean forgetting. It meant carrying it without collapse. I got my own set of keys made for David's house. Not because I needed them, but because he wanted me to know I was welcome. The moment he handed them to me, I didn't feel trapped or afraid. I felt trusted and free. This time, love didn't come with conditions. Came with open doors. 1 year after the divorce, I lit a candle by the lake and said nothing. No ceremony, no sadness. Just acknowledgement. That version of me, the one who stayed too long, who loved too hard, who broke quietly, was gone. I honored her. And then I let her go. Now, when I look in the mirror, I see a woman who rebuilt herself from splinters. She's not perfect. She still flinches at loud arguments and wakes from dreams with tears in her eyes. But she's real. And she never settles for less than she deserves again. David kissed my hand one night and said, "You don't have to be strong all the time." I didn't respond. I just leaned into him, rested my head on his shoulder, and let myself exhale. Love this time wasn't a battlefield. It was a place to land. And I finally felt home. If anyone asks what happened, I just say, I started over. Because the details don't matter anymore. Not the betrayal, not the silence, not even the pain. What matters is what I built after. A life I chose. A life that chose me back. That's the story I carry now. Some mornings I still wake up unsure of where I am. Not physically, but emotionally, like the old version of me is checking if it's safe to return. But then I smell the coffee David made, feel the softness of my sheets, the quiet hum of peace that now fills my home. And I remember, I'm no longer waiting to be loved right. I am loved well. And more importantly, I love myself without apology. I never imagined a version of my life where betrayal became a doorway to healing. I thought my story had ended in that bedroom, in that silence. But now I see it was just a breaking point, the moment I stopped surviving and started choosing myself. Every scar I carry has purpose. Every loss made space for something better. Emma still calls every Sunday just to check in, just to hear my voice and remind me I was never alone, even when I felt like it. We laugh more now, lighter than we used to. She tells me I look different, stronger, more present, more me. And she's right. I'm not rebuilding who I was. I'm becoming who I was meant to be. I don't hate Mark. That was a heavy coat I wore for a while. But I've since taken it off and left it in the past where it belongs. He made his choices. I made mine. And forgiveness, in its own quiet way, came not for him, but for me. Releasing the grip of old anger gave me back my hands. I needed them to build something new. David never tried to fix me. He just stayed steady and kind, offering love like a sunrise, soft, inevitable, and without demand. I still flinch sometimes. I still have walls. But he doesn't climb over them or knock them down. He waits at the gate until I'm ready. And that patience has healed more than any apology ever could. There's a garden behind our house now. Nothing big, just wildflowers and herbs and a bench under a tree. I sit there most evenings with a book or just my thoughts. The wind feels like a blessing, the quiet like a reward. I used to think peace was something other people found. Now I know it's something you build, one choice at a time. The woman I was on that hospital bed. Fragile, hopeful, unaware. She still lives in me somewhere. But she's not alone anymore. She has the version of me that walked barefoot into the cold, the one who left, who signed the papers, who started over. Together they form something whole. Not flawless, but whole. Sometimes people ask if I'll ever get married again. I don't have a yes or no. What I do have is a truth. I don't need a ring to feel chosen. I choose myself every single day. And if someone walks beside me, not in front or behind, that's enough. That's everything. The past doesn't visit much anymore. When it does, I let it pass through like a storm that no longer shakes my walls. I light a candle. I breathe deep. I let the memories come and go like waves. Because I am no longer drowning. I am the shore. And that's where my story ends. Not in heartbreak, not in revenge, not even in triumph. It ends in peace, in growth, in love that doesn't ask for proof or pain. I didn't just survive. I lived. And the life I built after the fire? That's the true beginning.